Bueno, vamos a continuar, se irá llenando porque somos en esto un poquito rezagados los españoles. Saludamos.
Apurando el café y ya enseguida entran.
Sí, sí. Saludamos a los que nos están siguiendo en streaming, tanto en España como fuera de España. Y bueno, vamos a continuar con otra interesante mesa redonda. En este caso, emprender, que es mucho más que crear una empresa. Es un aprendizaje continuo, un camino vital. De eso vamos a hablar. Por eso abrimos el diálogo sobre el emprendimiento como plataforma educativa. Con nosotros estará Alejandro Artacho, cofundador y CEO de Spotahome, que fue seleccionado como emprendedor Endeavor en 2019 durante el ISP de Tokio.
Sí, Mónica, y también vamos a contar con Ignacio Moreno, que es cofundador de la startup CapChase, que es la fintech que financia a otras startups y que ya ha levantado 72,5 millones para lanzar nuevos proyectos. Contamos también con Íñigo Mendoza, que es CEO de Lifecall, la primera plataforma digital de nuevas tecnologías en ofrecer cursos online en vivo con disciplinas innovadoras para niños y para adolescentes. Y también con Lupina Iturriaga, que es CEO y fundadora de Fintonic, y con Bernard Nieser, CEO y cofundador de Busuu, que es la comunidad en línea para aprender idiomas.
Y en este caso la moderadora será Liz Fleming, que vuelve, antes ya la vimos, la saludamos, Chief Ecosystem Officer de South Summit. Así que un fuerte aplauso para ellos.
Bienvenidos.
Good morning, Enlightened. Now we are rocking and rolling. What a morning already. And it's only midday. Just having the first coffee, the diesel is going, and now we're hitting full speed here at this 5th edition of Enlightened. I am so privileged to be here with this group this morning. Thank you so much to each and every one of you for being here. The level of experience on this stage right now is incredible. We only have 40 minutes, but we're going to squeeze every last bit of knowledge and juice out of these brilliant minds and incredible entrepreneurs that we have with us this morning at Enlighted. Such a wide range of experience, a huge diversity of experience. There's different types of solutions, all technological in this case, looking at loads of different market segments, including fintech, real estate, and of course, education. But really here, what we want to talk about is the entrepreneurial route as an educational platform. For these next 2 days, we are experimenting so many different ways to integrate technology into education, to disrupt the classroom and introduce new methodologies around education, to make sure that it's constantly ever more inclusive and diverse. And here we have an opportunity to look at a very specific moment in quite unique career paths, let's say, where these individuals decided to start a company. As I mentioned, they have all different backgrounds from different types of educational tracks, but what we're going to dive in here today is the educational value itself in building a company. The ultimate learning by doing. What are the transversal skills? What are the highs and the lows? The things that were unexpected? What have you learned building your companies that you never would have learned in the classroom? And how can those skills and experience maybe be transferred to others? How can we maybe think about this deeper, look at it more extensively? Can we bring these talents into the classroom? So this is really the conversation we're going to have over the next 30 plus minutes or so. And now I'm going to throw it over to you guys with a question, maybe a little controversial for this audience in this forum. Is it time to drop the MBA and start a company instead?
Well, maybe if I can start, I'm very glad I didn't drop my MBA because actually I did found my business out of the MBA. So as a background, I was previously in strategy consulting, but I was getting quite bored with that, to be honest, just recommending other people what to do rather than doing it by myself. And then I wanted to do an MBA, and I chose IE Business School because the school is very known for its entrepreneurial track. And luckily enough, I remember the day until today. On one afternoon, I decided to go to a networking event, sat down, a bit like here, and met next to myself my then co-founder, which had this initial idea of learning languages online, who was looking for a team. I was looking for an idea. We hit it off that day. We then did the business plan during IE, launched the company right afterwards, and yeah, 14 years later, we are now one of the largest language learning platforms in the world. So I'm glad I did my MBA.
I can share a similar story. I also defend the MBA, but in a different way. So at CapChase, we're 4 co-founders. We all had some sort of experience with the MBA. So one finished because it was a 1-year program. The other 2 were at Harvard when we started CapChase and ultimately dropped out. And I was about to start at Berkeley and didn't even start, right? So it really depends a lot on the path for everyone. But what the MBA does that you can emulate with other things is, so when you're building a tech company, you need, or you're trying to build an extraordinary company, you need extraordinary people, and then you need a place of high talent density where they can get together and, kind of like chemistry, right? You put together things and there's a reaction. And the MBA in that sense, it's a good path to get into that those 2 scenarios, right? So Harvard, for example, is a place where you get, or Yale, or any good business school is a place where you get very smart people that are highly motivated and in a place of high talent density, right? So it's easy for things to happen, no? So for us, when we were thinking about do we do an MBA or not, the answer was, well, it puts us on a path where we want to be, and ultimately I didn't even start it. My buddies didn't even finish it, but it was a really good gateway into entrepreneurship.
Alejandro.
I want to be a bit controversial by sharing a personal story, because I think we have listeners from all kind of educations, not only on MBA, but at the end, MBAs, universities, all that education has been longer in time than tech. In other words, in 2007, I was studying law and business, and I went on an exchange program to Mexico in Monterrey. And in Monterrey, there was a website that it was called atumesa.com that you would order food, and they would bring the food, to your home, right? Back in the day, in 2007, we were all ordering pizzas through the phone, right? Especially here in Spain, there were no online platform for food delivery. When I got to Monterrey, I was like 20 years old, and I loved that product, being in my house in the burrito place, ordering online. There were no phones, on the website. And then getting the burrito delivered, when I came back to Spain, I told my Spotahome co-founder, Brian, back then, we were roommates, and I said, dude, we got to build this. Monterrey, like everyone was ordering online food. This is going to change the industry. Forget about ringing and doing this. But both of us were at university, so we took the rational decision and not our feeling decision of just keeping studying and not doing it. And if we have tried, we would have been the first one in Spain setting up an online food delivery, which is something that I regret. But in either case, I don't think it's a one-way door decision, because because I didn't do that, then I ended up with a Spotahome, so you never have a crystal ball, right? But what I advise students when they have an idea and the train is now is that really you don't have nothing to lose by trying, because education will always be there, but the opportunity might not.
Yeah, I fully agree. I think if the question is, do you need to take an MBA to start up your own company? The answer is no. Actually, you don't even need to go to the university to start up your own company. There are examples of great entrepreneurs that have very little education, formal education. However, if you think about the advantages that gives you formal education, and an MBA are huge. Mm-hmm. So Bernhard and we have both taken MBAs. In my case, it was at INSEAD. We had a lot of exposure to entrepreneurs because it's an MBA very focused on entrepreneurship. And the network, the formal knowledge that you learn, the skills that they pass on to you, the tips that they give to you, don't make these mistakes, clearly help you to succeed when you start up your own company.
Lupina, what role has education played in your trajectory?
Well, I have a fintech company, so if I haven't studied finance, it would be impossible, I feel, not to launch it, because I feel when I talk with the students, sometimes they don't have the technical knowledge about things. And for me, it depends on what you're going to launch, which type of company you're going to launch. I don't have an MBA, but I do have a lot of no formal education. What I mean is, I did study math, business administration, and then afterwards, right now, I'm like studying psychology. I'm studying no formal programs such as Reforge, that is an online American program, and I am keep on continually studying all the time behavioral economics a lot right now, for example. And when I began, I didn't have this type of books such as Inspire or different books for entrepreneurs that I just did it, you know, just talk with the customers, just go and just understand what they need and what they don't have. I did have the financial knowledge. I did know all the pains that the people were suffering, about their finances. But right now, I see that we have to evolve and evolve and evolve. And my husband always told me, Lupina, but you are like working or studying more than when you started. And I say, I know, because I have to keep on evolving, because the world is changing, the people is changing. So really, right now, I am learning just like many, many things that I never thought I would have the possibility to learn. So if you want to do an MBA, it's great, but if not, keep on learning. You need to be really curious about what's going on in the world, because if not, everyone is going to surpass you very fast, and you have to keep being pioneering what you do.
That's amazing. I was going to say how wonderful it is that you have the constant need to constantly learn new things, right? And I guess that takes us right back to the core of the conversation in terms of what you can learn through entrepreneurship. So what are some of the lessons? Like, what are some of the skills you've acquired that maybe you didn't even know you had before you set up your companies? Or a lot of you now, well, all of you are at the scale-up stage, right? You're now mature executives within the businesses that you've founded, let's say. So I guess the learning changes at every stage of the company. You need to acquire constantly new skills and experiences. But can you give me some example, and for the audience here, what are the skills that you realized you were kind of suddenly beginning to acquire, maybe at the earlier stages or maybe at the scale-up, whatever you like to focus in on, but maybe give us a couple of examples of things that might have been challenging to learn in the classroom or a different type of environment.
I think one key skill as an entrepreneur that you need is perseverance. That's probably the most important skill, because it doesn't really matter at whatever stage you are, whether it's just with a business plan and you're about to found the business, or you're a growth scale company, or you're about to go IPO, there will always be all sorts of challenges. It never really turns into like a smooth sailing. That's at least my experience from 14 years as an entrepreneur. And therefore, I think you just need to constantly overcome challenges and just accept the fact that it's a bumpy road, and you need to live with that. And not only do you need to overcome these challenges, but you also need to have the capacity then to motivate others to be with you on the journey, which is also something that I think is normally not really taught in educational institutions, and something that I had to learn over time. Right now, we have now about 200 people in the business. We just got acquired by a listed company from the US. So you really need to have the capacity to motivate the team, to believe in your vision, and to constantly overcome the difficulties that are coming your way.
Sounds easy.
It's not. It's not.
Alejandro.
I completely agree. Resilience is key, but I think thinking and maybe it comes later. But comparing to education, it's not about the what, but the how. And I wish in education they were teaching students more on the how, because then what we see is that the world is. It has turmoil and it's volatile, and the greatest leaders are the ones that can adapt quickly, and whatever it was in your what, it will change constantly, but what it would be permanent is how you deal with stuff. And I think those skills, are essential, and it comes, I guess, when I started to realize that at the beginning everything was important and everything was urgent. And then it got to a point that I was like, okay, it cannot be that everything is important and urgent. And maybe when you study, because today is about education, I think everything is taught as at equal level, but there has to be things that are more important than others. So it helps you prioritize, again, and think on the how. So then I started to realize that I should focus first on what is important and urgent, and then second it would be potentially what it may be urgent, or no, what is important nor urgent, and then so start doing your framework or prioritization, because your energy levels are limited, and the most important thing you have is your energy. And how you manage that, right? So, and then we can come with leadership skills, which I guess, in my case, I think, and for everyone, we are deeply inside leaders that we are developing since we are children, right? But then when you set up a business and you start having employees, all of that flourishes and it's inside you, and maybe you were not even conscious, right? And I think powering up those inner leadership skills that you already have, and knowing how to navigate those, becoming better leader is potentially the greatest skill that you should have to lead.
For me, there are three clear skills, and I must say first that for me, soft skills are at the heart of success when it comes to entrepreneurship. You really need to have certain skills if you want to succeed, in addition to have knowledge and experience. One clearly is taking decisions in uncertain environments. We all have a lot of uncertainty, and we all face a lot of uncertainty. We all look for as much data as we can in order to take rational decisions, but at the end of the day, you need to take the decision. And mastering that ability and having good outcomes out of these decisions taken is critical. Second is what my friend was mentioning here is prioritizing, because we have all so many ideas, and we all want to do so many things, but at the end of the day, we have so many hours, we have so many companions working with us, and we have so much resources. So you need to really prioritize and see where you put your chips. And the third one is, for me, is communication and networking. It's clear, I mean, we are now communicating, we are expressing you need to talk with your investors in order to convince them to bring money to the table, the money that you need. You need to work every day with your team. I mean, if you're not able to, first of all, listen to them and get their ideas and make the best decision altogether, put in the best inputs in the right place, I mean, you really need to have it if you want to succeed. So for me, these are the three critical ones, but there are many.
So for me, I have to say, and kind of building on what you said, Inigo, so one of the key things that I sort of overlooked when we first started Capchase was the culture side, and that skill set that is super important for leaders is also very important for everybody in the company, right? If you wanna get cool stuff built, you need people that make good decisions, that prioritize, and that communicate well, no? And for us, what we saw is that culture is at the very heart of how those decisions are made and how people prioritize and how people make choices within a company, no? So one of the bigger learnings was, that the importance of building and communicating a great culture. And there are many different types of cultures. Like if you compare the culture of Uber with the culture of Airbnb, like some people might hate the culture of Uber and love the culture of Airbnb, and they're not necessarily one is good and one is bad, they're just different. But being able to build it consistently so that the people that join have let's say, a framework for how to behave in the company and how to build great things, it's critical, no? So that's one of the things we learned, where I learned when we were building the company, and now it's a very, very core pillar of some of the things that the leadership team does.
Just to add, because there were great things that have been said. For me, one thing that you really learn, like when you have or you launch a company, is your baby also, no? And you have to involve all your team, so it's going to be their baby. They have to be aligned with your mission. For me, what is much more important in what you do is that you believe on your purpose. So, the purpose is very important. No? So we want to improve the people's financial well-being, and we really think we are going to have a positive impact in the society. But if the team doesn't believe that, if your investors don't believe on that, it's impossible. No? So you really need to have a passion to do it. You really need to involve all your team on that. And it's not easy because you cannot do it alone. Of course, prioritizing. And you need people that are really resilient. And you must know that things now in this type, in this world, that there are a lot of quitters, no? Quitters, quitted, everyone quits really fast, everything, they need it now. You need a lot of patience, because if things, to have all the building blocks and to make a company, it takes time. And when you are in a big bank, when I was, you don't care if it turned to fire or whatever, you leave and you go. But here you need to understand that everyone is going to be implicated, your family, your life, no? You're not going to have holidays, you're not going to, because you love what you do. So you learn to prioritize, but not only in your work, but also in your life. Because you need to organize yourself in a certain way so you can handle everything, because it's very stressful to have a company, because this is like a roller coaster, not to be in a startup. So if you are here just for the money, I think you're going to fail, for example. No? You have to feel that you're going to make something huge, that's going to have some impact, that the mission is important, because if you want money, better maybe stay in a bank or maybe stay in another place, no? That is going to be much more safe. But here you understand that it's important what you are doing, no? For the society, for the community, for the future, for everyone. So I learned so many things. I could be like talking for hours and hours just about this topic, because you learned everything, no? You learned in the bank, you learn what you do, or on the huge company, and there's a lot of politics, no? To go there. But here there is no politics. What you do, you're going to see it the next week, the next day. You have to take decisions really fast, but also you have to think your roadmap. You're going to overcome so many challenges that you never thought they were going to be, because you have a business plan, it's going to change. But I think all entrepreneurs, we are really positive, because if we are not like that, you're not going to succeed. Everyone tells you it's going to fail because of this. They always tell you it's going to fail because no one has done it before. So, but you say, no, I can overcome this because I have a great team, and we all believe. And if you're resilient, you work hard, and you have good luck, you will make it, no? But you need also good luck and type of market.
Of course, it's everything. No, it's all of it combined, I guess. No, it's absolutely fascinating to hear you guys, and every single one of you have talked about skills really and capabilities that are totally transversal, right? And I guess that in some shape or other form that we all learn throughout life, but it seems to be in an accelerated manner in the area of entrepreneurship. Absolutely adore, Lupina, that you talk about patience, because even though it's directly related, I guess, to perseverance and resilience, it's not something that we talk about in the entrepreneurial world, which is fundamental, and also not just the importance of prioritization, which is critical, the prioritization of your life, because these things are fundamentally integrated. And I think in all educational tracks and all career paths, things are starting to blend, and people are constantly evaluating, well, quality of life and their career trajectory and whatever, maybe financial or impactful goals or whatever ideas they might have. It's really important to look at it from a holistic perspective, I guess. So I really appreciate you for raising that topic. And I think it's particularly accentuated in the area of entrepreneurship, because your job becomes your purpose, really, is what we kind of see a common theme among successful entrepreneurs, that they're building something much greater than themselves, much greater than the financial reward that it can offer, and usually to better other people's lives, right? Which is really admirable, noble cause. But I'm glad you mentioned that, because I do feel that that is probably one of the greatest deterrents of people choosing the path of entrepreneurship, is this kind of binary, narrow focus that it's this or nothing, and it's all or nothing, right? And I think that's the one highway to burnout, right? And even I becoming more from the investor side traditionally, this is something you're constantly looking at a founding team, you know? I mean, their holistic health is now critical in terms of the company's health and probability of success. So getting to my question is, nature versus nurture? Is entrepreneurship for everyone? Can it be taught?
Well, if I can start like really quick, I think to be an entrepreneur, you need to be, you cannot risk adverse. It's very important, you know. We are continuously facing so many risks that you are risk adverse at the end, because you know you can overcome it. So I think it's not for everyone. You have to be really positive. You don't have to care much about the risk you're gonna find there. And of course, I think you have that intrinsic, so you cannot learn that. If you are not that way, you cannot do it, and it's great. But also there's many things that you can do in universities or wherever, because or in books, like I told you, if you're gonna entrepreneur, please read Inspire, and I think there are so many guides, no, at the end of the day that help you, no, to be a better entrepreneur and not to fail on what everyone has failed in the past. Well, okay, there's a clear path how to do it, but I think it's something intrinsic also. If you some people, they don't want to live like that, or their purpose is better in their company, you know, and they're more safer, and it's great, no? We need all that also. Just that.
Yeah, I mean, I think to add, as said, like a lot of the skills can be acquired, and I think it was pretty obvious in the statements that we made that none of us sitting here were made entrepreneurs when we started our entrepreneurial journeys. I think we all learned so much during this. But then, again, there is maybe something in nature that you can encourage, like, you know, taking risk, you know, sometimes maybe just asking for things. I mean, that's one of my key learnings. Asking just comes for free, and you will be surprised. If you don't ask, you will never get, but actually you just should ask. And those are things that, you know, personally I encourage with my kids as well, to just make sure that, you know, they also think a little bit out of the box, because as we see, and I think you said it as well, a lot of people who just succeeded academically, not necessarily were very great entrepreneurs. In fact, it's the opposite. People who dropped out of schools, who were always a little bit different, didn't necessarily fully fit in, turned out to be fantastic entrepreneurs because they see opportunities that no one else actually sees. And they do the way different than, you know, if you just go with a very standard path. But I agree, entrepreneurship is not for everyone. And most importantly, people need to find a project where they really have a passion for. Because if you don't really burn for your project, then you're going to burn out. And so I think that is, and this was my case. I loved learning languages. I still love it. And that's what keeps me up at night and what makes me jump out of bed in the morning.
And just to be clear, Bernard has perfect Spanish, by the way. We're not having this conversation in English just for him. So he's 4 languages, I believe, and counting. So Alejandro, you wanted to jump in?
I want to be a bit controversial again. So I disagree with you guys, but I think I would agree because it's a difficult question. But I'm, you know, kind of positive. I think everyone has the. It all depends on the ecosystem, right? At least you are chief ecosystem chief, right? So the thing is, you know, for example, to be an entrepreneur, you gotta be a risk taker. You gotta have almost survival mode. You gotta be perseverant. You know, if you are in a comfortable place, you don't need to do that, right? But even if you take someone that you won't think have an entrepreneurial mindset, if you throw them in the middle of a jungle, somewhere in the world, you know, with nothing, entrepreneurial skills are gonna come out for sure before that person gets eaten, right? So coming out of that jungle, probably that person maybe is an entrepreneur itself, right? And then we would need to define what is entrepreneur, because I cannot believe that someone that is building a family and has 5 kids with all that it takes, you know, building that family, what is that different to actually building a company and having 10 employees, 100 employees, 1,000 employees? Now you could find different levels and different appetite or ambition or kind of, you know, in your maybe joyful levels, you know. So you may think, okay, if I have 1,000 employees, I'm gonna enjoy the journey, right? But I think it's all about the ecosystem. There are many potential incredible entrepreneurs in the world that are not surrounded by the right ecosystem because we live in a comfortable place. And then if the conditions on the comfort zone maybe are better, but also time, you know, your lifetime, you cannot make a decision of who you are because of what you think today. You know, all of that evolves as you are evolving yourself and you're growing and it comes. So I think deeply and positively inside that anyone can be an entrepreneur if it's correctly inspired and is in the right ecosystem. And everyone can do whatever they choose to do. That's what I believe.
And building on what Alejandro is saying, I think we should encourage people to become entrepreneurs if they want to be entrepreneurs. So obviously, I mean, first of all, we need to demystify entrepreneurship. It's not like this is for an elite and just a few, certain people with few characteristics can make it. No, that's not the case. I think in Spain sometimes we focus too much on or the corporate career or the public service, and I think we should start opening also to the kids and to people studying also in the university and later on that this possibility is like you can start up your own company, and if you want to do that, what we need to do is first of all encourage them to dream. I mean, Lupina said before, you need to have a passion. This is going to be very hard. It's going to be very fun, but there are going to be horrible days, and you have to go through it. So you need to have passion for it. That's for sure. But once you have that, we need to give them the skill set that they need, and we need to give them the knowledge that they need. Because obviously, if you're an entrepreneur and you know the right skill set and you know the right tools, it's going to be way easier to go through and succeed than if you don't have it, and you have to learn being in the jungle, trying not to get eaten by the animals.
I mean, I don't have a super strong opinion on this. I do think that so it may not be for everyone, just like, I don't know, medicine is not for everyone, law is not for everyone, engineering is not for everyone, no? And I think, so, for example, when we hire people at CapChase, we always try to look for the sort of the founder-like mentality, just because it typically means they're people that are very intrinsically motivated and self-starters, and they kind of do things just because they love doing it. So that passion aspect that I think was Lupina that was mentioned before, no? And that's great for our stage, right? But once you get to a bigger stage, you need more like people that are specialized. You need like the law people, the engineers, the doctors, right? But I do think that there's one trait which is the builder attitude, which I think is probably the one that's the better predictor for success in entrepreneurship. And I think everybody has it to some extent, but the key question for me is, to your point, some people you need to drop them in a jungle to get it out, and some people have it intrinsically, right? So, I don't know, is it for everybody? Maybe, but some people, yeah, they need to be placed under extreme conditions, and some people have it naturally, So, I'd rather hire at this stage, right, the one that has it naturally, so I don't have to build on it, right? Like being very transparent. But then there are other stages in which that's not the case, right?
But that naturally, it may be by circumstances, because one thing that I see is that there are more chances to find entrepreneurs who come from parents that are entrepreneurs themselves than the other way around. So again, it comes through the ecosystem. Why have there been historically more entrepreneurs in the last decades in US, especially, for example, if you go to the West Coast, rather than maybe in Europe? And why do you have different ecosystems with a bigger, not only in quantity, but also quality entrepreneurs? Yep. So it's all about the ecosystem. So again, I
100% agree with that, yes. So the ecosystem as a catalyzer for this is critical, for sure.
Right. But I agree with you on looking for entrepreneurs, because also I was thinking, once you have a team and you tell the leader of the team, hey, launch a product, you have these resources, do it. That person is within your company. Is that person an entrepreneur or not?
For sure.
Right? So I think that comes to the education, right?
Yeah.
Is the same. In the students and stuff, you throw them and give them resources to manage, to do something. Are they entrepreneurs or not?
100%.
And also, just to add on that, for example, when we have here in Spain a huge crisis and the people went out to the uni and they didn't have any jobs,
good point.
It arise a lot of entrepreneurs.
Right.
But not all were naturally entrepreneurs, And what I mean on that is when one day I was with all my family, we call it the aquelarre. Aquelarre is like a witch woman talking, And we were all the women of my family there, and I heard my auntie saying, wow, she didn't show me, wow, if I were Lupina, I'd kill myself. And I heard her and say, what are you saying? Why? And all my cousins, yes. I hate what she does. I love the purpose, but I can't handle that. She's so active all the day, And I told them, why? But I don't know if you go every day to your work saying, so happy I am. Today I have this challenge I'm going to overcome. And sometimes I'm really stressed, but always with this energy, you know, and I'll say, no, I don't want to tempt. And they were all telling me, oh, but you were so good at studies. Why didn't you study to be, I don't know, notario or whatever, you know, and técnico comercial de Estado? Because I did have all that, you know, on my hands, and I did thought about that on that moment. And then I said, wow, but I want something else. So
I'm really glad you didn't become a Spanish notario. They're not really helping the ecosystem. Just saying.
Those two, for sure, for sure. Fascinating, guys, and kind of loop it back. I don't think there's any clear-cut answer to that, right? It's a trick question, of course. But it is curious to see different examples, like, you know, risk appetite, let's say, but I guess it's really dependent on how that is framed, right? So, you know, we frequently had Martin Farsaski, serial entrepreneur, in and out of South Summit. He always talks about, you know, governmental coups in Argentina and people being dragged out of their homes and shot dead, you know, or your money just being taken out of your account. And he was like, well, if that's the reality of the risk that you're living with, starting a company is, you know, nothing. Again, why you see places like Israel, right? So really, really powerful hubs of entrepreneurship where adversity and risk is a different thing. So again, I guess it's within the context that you're in, which is quite exciting. And I remember my first contact really with entrepreneurship was around 2006 and jumped in 2008. And everybody was losing their jobs. Everybody at the big banks and the big government jobs were losing their jobs. And I was like, well, if you're talking about risk, why in the name of God would you put your destiny in somebody else's hands so they can decide when your career is over or accelerating or whatever else? So I guess it's really about perception and where you're coming from. At a university, we talk about the entrepreneurial spirit, right? So whether you're a founder, you're not a founder, you're an entrepreneur, you're not an entrepreneur, I think all of the skills that you've discussed are critical for most individuals facing the world we face today, which is, again, constant flux and change. So we talk a lot about the entrepreneurial spirit, and that everybody needs to have an entrepreneurial spirit at kind of any level of the organization, let's say. And at South Summit, we're all about like backing the entrepreneurs directly, and we want more entrepreneurs all of the time. And talent is evenly distributed, is the famous saying, no, but opportunity is not. So we, you know, all boats rise with the tide. So we believe that if more people have access to the opportunity of entrepreneurship, there will be more entrepreneurs, there'll be more diversity entrepreneurs, there'll be more female entrepreneurs, all the different types of individuals will be represented, and smaller companies, big companies, tech companies, service companies, whatever it might be, I think there's huge, huge opportunities there. Folks, I want to give you guys the incredible opportunity to participate in this conversation. We have 5 minutes. There's a couple of microphones over here that they're rushing to grab now that I've warned them. But please raise your hand wide and high and join us in this conversation if you want to ask this amazing panel any questions at all. I have a whole bunch of questions. I'm just being really generous in sharing. So think about your question. I have a microphone. Oh, lights. We even have lights. Amazing. And I have one quick one. I'm not going to get 5 of you to answer, but I want one of you guys to make a comment on today's job market, hiring your own teams, and you can think about your question. So switching gear to the market, you guys are constantly hiring. You touched on already, Ignacio, what you're looking at in the people that you're hiring. What's your perception today? Do we have the talent and skills available in the market that you guys need to scale your companies? Is it becoming more competitive? Quick summary from one or two of you.
Very competitive, no? In tech, it's very, very competitive. And so now you have to have teams well prepared with onboarding processes, and that they really, because people change, no, rotate much more than they did in the past in the tech side. We need to be prepared for that.
It's kind of a paradox because we live in a country where unemployment is an issue, but at the same time for us, it is an issue to go to the market and find sometimes the specialists that we need. And the more specialized, the more difficult it becomes. And technology clearly today is an area where finding specialists is very difficult.
The more mature the market is, the worse. So in the US, it's a bit of a bloodbath, getting talent, and they're constantly switching. In Europe, we're finding it a little bit easier, but it's getting more difficult as well.
But then again, we're entering into a recession, and you see all the big tech players actually laying off staff, unfortunately. So to a certain extent, that might help for smaller companies to attract some of the top talent. And I think the other big shift was really throughout COVID that more and more companies are just more open, including us, to hire fully remote employees. And we have offices here in Madrid, but now equally we have people in Cádiz or in Bilbao or wherever it might be. And I think that is an opportunity.
Last chance, guys. Oh, we got one here. Yeah, excellent. We can get a mic up, please.
What do you think the key is to successfully competing against other small companies that are doing something similar?
Competition.
Do it better and faster.
Yeah, exactly.
It's a great question. I don't know if you want to.
Don't over-obsess about your competition. I think, as long as you know what you're good at and you stay focused and you execute well, it's a long journey, so I wouldn't stress too much about what the others are doing.
Don't look at them. I like never look at my competitors when I'm doing my thing. I really look at others that I think that they do it the best in the world. Now I am in finance, but maybe I'm looking at other type of apps very different from mine and trying to get the best of them, of course, and try to implement that. But with your competitor, this is going to be a race, so keep on not seeing what they do, but try to focus on what you do best and go your path.
Client is king. Focus on your client. Focus on who they are. And it seems very easy, but it's not that easy. Huh? So understand who they are, what they want, how they want it, and then provide a great service to them, and you will be successful.
And then I would add a tweak. I think you need to define what is success, because it's success in which parameters, I would guess. I'll throw it there.
Amazing, thank you. On that philosophical thought, we will let that linger with the audience and with everybody else. Thank you, Ali. Guys, that's all we have time for. Thank you so much for being with us here today. Thank all of you guys for being here and participating. A big warm round of applause, please, for our speakers.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.